Welcome to a live webinar hosted by Gavel & Gowan Software, makers of Amicus Attorney Practice Management Solutions. Our guest speaker today is Jennifer Ramis of Affinity Consulting Group. Jennifer is the Director of Education for Affinity University, Affinity Consulting Group's online legal technology training division. She's a graduate of The Ohio State University with a degree in political science. Jennifer then earned her law degree from Capital University Law School. Jennifer specializes in consulting and training on practice management software for law firms. Her expertise extends to practice management, document assembly, document management, and analyzing law office workflow to help firms develop policies and procedures that maximize both productivity and profitability. Jennifer has been an Amicus certified consultant since 2004. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, and welcome, everyone. As you know, today's topic is the case for practice management, why Outlook is not enough. And I want to start just by saying that I think Outlook is a great program, and mean no disrespect to it as we go through today and tell you all of the different ways that it falls short of being the right program for a law firm to rely on to run their entire firm. But we want to focus today on why legal-specific practice management programs really are a key component to a streamlined, productive, and efficient law firm. If you think about the way we practiced law on paper, we really relied on that paper file to contain everything we needed. So when I was practicing law, I would open up my paper file, and I would have a client intake sheet stapled to the inside front cover of that file. And it had names and phone numbers and fax numbers and email addresses and addresses for everybody that I might deal with. Sometimes it was a business card stapled to the inside front cover. Sometimes it was a fax number written with a Sharpie marker. It was a mess, but that's what I went to when I needed to get information about a case that I was working on. The problem with the paper file was that not everything ended up in the paper file. I would take phone call notes and write it on paper and put it in a pile to be filed, and the managing partner who was also working on the case would take notes in his or her office, and they wouldn't make it to the file. And sometimes our support staff would be stopped in their tracks of getting productive work done because I took the file home and they needed one small piece of information from the file to do the document that I asked them to create, like find a date of death or a social security number for the decedent or a claim number or a statute of limitations date. So we had this reliance on the paper file, and it really ended up causing workflow stoppages because everybody needed the same paper file. So enter technology. Let's take the paper file out of the equation a little bit. Let's rely on it less, and let's put all of our case and contact information into a piece of software. So a lot of people use Outlook to do that. They have their contacts in Outlook. They have their calendar items in Outlook. They might even have tasks and some general notes in Outlook. And that's a good start for getting the information that you need to share across your firm into a piece of software that people can access. But it falls short because Outlook does not respect or understand the unique organizational structure of a law firm. And that is that law firms are client and matter centric. What I mean by that is, just like in paper, we had paper files that might have lived inside of a red rope file that might have lived inside of a big file cabinet drawer. We would have our clients' names, and if our client had multiple matters, then they had multiple folders that represented the cases that we were working on for them. When you think about Outlook, you think really about contacts. You think about the calendar. You think about the tasks list. But what Outlook is missing is that file-centric, that client and file-centric organization. In fact, Outlook has no such record type as a file. They've got journal entries and notes and calendar and tasks and to-dos, but they don't have anything called a file. So at a very basic level, Outlook falls short of understanding what law firms need to properly organize the work that they're doing. The other dilemma we have with Outlook is that in a lot of firms that maybe aren't using Exchange or are smaller firms and haven't invested the time in structuring Outlook in a way that is easily shared, sometimes you're dealing with multiple installations of Outlook on local machines, which means we have many places to search. And Outlook doesn't truly give us a spot to centralize our data. It causes us to enter things multiple times and often results in us having conflicting data. And I want to just give you an example of what I mean by that. if you think about contacts in Outlook, and I promise you that only a few minutes of the presentation are going to be in a PowerPoint, that I'm going to bring Amicus and Outlook up and really show you in real time some of the differences. So if you think about a contact, if you're just using Outlook to manage your contacts, I might have Outlook installed on my local machine, and I go in and I add Katie Kennedy to my contact list. And what I don't know is someone else in my office has also talked to Katie Kennedy about something, and so they go add Katie Kennedy to their contact list. Well, then Katie Kennedy gets married and her last name changes. And I know that, so I changed Katie Kennedy in my contact list. But the other people in my office didn't know that, so they still have her maiden name. And then I find out that Katie's email address has changed, so I update it. And now 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 other people have to update it manually as well. Because Outlook, if you're not using Outlook at the Exchange level and you haven't taken the time to set up a master contact list, which a lot of firms do not take the time to do, you are causing dual entry for many of your staff members, and that is simply just not an efficient use of their time. You cannot create easily one-to-many relationships in Outlook. And an example of this is think about a client that you have that has many matters in your office. So Jennifer Ramus comes to your office initially to have you help with an employment agreement, and then 3 months later, you are dealing with my real estate closing that I'm having you help me with, and then I need a prenuptial agreement, and then, God forbid, maybe I need you to help me with my divorce. You may potentially deal with me on 4 different files, yet Outlook doesn't really give you a way to organize that because there's no such thing as a file in Outlook. So on my contact record in Outlook, you might have notes and information about 4 different cases with no organizational structure whatsoever. So I want to just bring you quickly into a sample contact record in Amicus. So in Amicus, when I open a contact record, I see a contact card, which is very user-friendly. The interface is great. It's very intuitive. Everything in Amicus is very logical. And I see a contact card. On the left-hand side of the contact, I see all of the information that is specific to this contact. I can see any notes that I've added to this contact. To be fair to Outlook, you can add a note to a contact in Outlook as well. The beauty of adding a note to an Amicus contact is that everyone in my office has access to the contact and therefore has access to the note, which you actually don't typically have with your local Outlook installation. But the next thing that I want to point out is this Files option right here on the left-hand side. This is where I can really see my relational database, which is what Amicus Attorney is, working to my advantage. I can look at a contact card for Clark Admiral, who happens to be one of my clients, and I can see that Clark has many relationships. He has a relationship on the Admiral Heating file. He's the client. He has a relationship on the Cooperman file. He happens to be a purchaser. And he has a relationship on the Burwood file. He's a director. So I can see not only the many relationships that they have, but I can see the type of relationship that this contact has on multiple different cases in my office. So even if my contact is a client in one situation, but a witness or an arbitrator or something else on another case, I can see that right here on the Amicus Attorney contact screen. The next thing I want to point out is that when I go into Amicus to look up a contact, I may need to do a number of things. I may need to call this person. I may need to send them an email. I may need to schedule an appointment with them. And while I can do those things in Outlook, I can open a contact and I can say, let me make a journal entry about a phone call I had. In Amicus Attorney, things are just organized in a more effective way. So you will notice on my contact card that I have a little picture of a phone. So in Amicus, if I need to call my client, I simply click on the phone and a new phone call record pops up. It inherits some really important information for me. First of all, it knows I was on Clark's contact card, so it assumes that I'm making a call either to or from Clark. It indicates the number that I used to make this call, and it also enables me to see all of the other phone numbers that are available for this particular contact. It knows that I am logged into Amicus Attorney as Heather, and so it indicates that on the phone call record, the call was made by Heather. Here is something that you will not find in a journal record in Outlook. This is tell me what file you're going to talk to Clark about. So if I click on this little picture of a file, Amicus will bring up a list of files that this particular contact is related to. I'll select the file. You'll notice that the date and time filled in, and this little timer has been running from the moment I started talking about phone calls. So I can type the details of my call, and you'll notice it spell checks for me. Outlook doesn't really do that in the journal note. And why do I care about spell checking my note about a phone call? Well, because like any good practice management program, Amicus says, I would also like to help you capture your time for this phone call. Outlook has no concept of billing your time whatsoever, so even though that's a slide to come, I'll highlight it here as well. So I'm going to be able to fix my spelling error very easily here, and then you'll see that I have a number of different options down here. I can print this phone call record. Now, I'm a big fan of reducing the amount of paper we have, but if you want to have a paper record of the phone call that you can keep in the paper file, you can absolutely start your phone call in Amicus and then hit the print button. But my favorite button in Amicus, anywhere in Amicus, is this button that says do a time entry. So those of you who are attending today, whether you're lawyers or paralegals or legal secretaries, any legal professional that is required to capture the time that they spend on client matters should be thrilled to see the do a time entry button. We are constantly trying to find ways to help lawyers and legal professionals capture more billable time. Make sure they are logging the time that they're spending. And the only way to do that is to capture your time contemporaneously with the task. Write your time down, log your time, capture your time, enter your time the moment you finish the phone call, the moment you send the email, the minute you get back from the meeting, as soon as you finish drafting the note. That is the best and #1 way to capture the most billable time that you possibly can. So Amicus has built that into their interface. You did the call, the timer's running. Right from the phone call record, I can say do a time entry. A time entry will pop up, and it will save me even more time because now my time entry has inherited information from my phone call. It knows that the call is from Heather Gavel, so it assumes that I'm the timekeeper. Good assumption. That's correct. It knows the date was today. It knows I called regarding the Burwood file, so of course it's going to bill the Burwood file. It captures all of the information it needs to send the information to my billing program, whether I'm using Amicus Premium Plus Billing or another billing program that I have conveniently linked with Amicus. And you'll notice that it even fills in my activity description with telephone call to Clark Admiral. Now, you guys can't see my hands, but I didn't type that. Amicus is smart enough to say, you launched a time entry from a phone call record. So I'm going to help you out with your description and say, telephone call to Clark Admiral. Now, this is optional. You do not have to have Amicus do this, but you can also say to Amicus, any notes that I type over here, include in my phone call record. So if you have people who are hesitant to enter their own time because they're not great at typing or they think it's going to take longer than writing it down, this sort of dispels that myth because all I did was click do a time entry from a phone call and it filled in with a description that I didn't even have to type. You will also notice that my duration filled in for me based on the amount of time that had elapsed on this timer when I clicked on do a time entry. And it rounded it up to my minimum billable amount. This is another great thing about Amicus. It understands the way lawyers and legal professionals need to bill. So if I spend 2 minutes, but my minimum billable amount is a 0.2, and I've said that in my retainer letter and my clients have agreed to it, Amicus is not going to put in some strange decimal here to represent 2 minutes and 49 seconds. It's going to round it up to a 0.2, which is 12 minutes. If 12 minutes and 2 seconds had elapsed on this timer, this would have been a 0.3 because Amicus rounds up for me. Of course, I can change it. Nothing that I see here on the screen am I stuck with, but Amicus defaults things and inherits things for you so that you can streamline that process of entering your time. So I'll just hit OK here, and we'll get back to the contact record. You will also notice that I have an email address here. So for any contact that I have an email address for, all I have to do is click on the email address. Amicus will pop up and confirm that I'm sending a message to Clark Admiral. I can link it to the appropriate file. Think about what happens when you send an email in Outlook. You hit New and you start typing the email address. and you sometimes grab the wrong person's name from your autofill because a lot of people have similar names. And there's almost nowhere in that email where you can identify what file you are discussing in that email, except for typing out the client or matter name in the subject line. But with Amicus, I click on the file drop-down, and I pick the name of the file that the email is related to. When I hit open, I get tossed right into Outlook, and that's fine because Amicus doesn't want to replace Outlook for purposes of being a workhorse and sending and receiving emails, but it filled in with the email address, it filled in with the file name, and here is my email, and I can hit send. Amicus makes it so that I can work from one place, which saves me an inordinate amount of time. I'm not toggling back and forth between multiple programs. Everything I need to do, I can do from within the Amicus Attorney interface. So the other great thing about this is, let's say that Clark Admiral changes his title or gets a new address. I can easily hit the edit button here and edit any of Clark's contact information, and every single person in my firm automatically has the benefit of the updated information. So updating contacts is no longer as laborious as it is when you have to update a contact in Outlook. The next thing I want to talk about quickly is the difference between a calendar in Outlook and the calendar in Amicus. I really do like the Outlook calendar. I think that it presents us with a lot of great options, and it is absolutely better than using a paper calendar. But the same limitations exist inside of an appointment in Outlook as existed inside of the contact record. And it really goes to that ability to link a calendar item with the exact client or matter that the appointment or to-do is related to. Think about how you potentially use Outlook right now. When my client calls in and says, you know I have a deposition coming up on the Baxter case. Can you tell me when it is? Most likely, in your Outlook calendar, you just start clicking through the days until you see it. You might run a search, but if you've ever run a search on a word like deposition in your Outlook calendar and you get 400 results, it makes it pretty difficult to identify when that appointment is happening for that particular client. But in Amicus, I can simply go to their file in Amicus because it has a list of all of the upcoming events and to-dos for that particular case, and I can identify that appointment much faster for my client. And that does a couple of things. Let me bring up the Amicus calendar here and just show you quickly how we create a new appointment, and then I'll flip over to the Amicus file and show you where you see that relationship. So let's say that today is Tuesday, November 19th, and I need to put an appointment on my calendar for 3 o'clock. So I will put a new appointment on my calendar for 3 o'clock, and I will link it. Oops, I didn't mean to close that out so quickly. And I will link it to one of my cases. So here's the screen that you get in Amicus when you are creating a new appointment. And it might seem like there are more fields on this screen than you have in Outlook, and there are. And that's because it's a more powerful calendar, and it can do many more things for you than Outlook can do. So don't be turned off by the number of fields. Many of them can be defaulted. Some of them, if you're not using that particular feature, you don't need to worry about. The title here is the same as your title in Outlook, and I'll just put deposition of Dr. Spratt. I can indicate whether it's an appointment or a to-do. This is a nice feature in Amicus. In Outlook, those record types are so separate that you can't really toggle between the two. But in Amicus, if I start to do something and I say, you know what, I don't think I want that to be an appointment. I'd rather it be a to-do, I can change that quality of the event right here on the fly. I'm going to fill in a date and a time, a start time and an end time, just like I would in Outlook. There's nothing more here than you have in Outlook. The location, just like Outlook, I can say, you know, this is at our offices, or I can indicate what courtroom it's in, what have you. I can also give the appointment a category. Now, you absolutely have categories in Outlook, but where the distinction can be made is that in Outlook, nearly everything you do from setting up categories and color codes and that sort of thing is done at the user level. So one person in Outlook might call depositions, and give them the color of red, and another one might call them depos and give them a color of green. And when you're looking at the shared calendar in Outlook, you have a giant mess on your hands. Jen's depos are red, Katie's are green, Jody's are blue, Debbie's are orange. So you can't really look at the calendar from a global perspective and see how much of any one particular thing you have, because everybody's using categories however they decided to use them. Whereas with Amicus Attorney, you can set categories at the firm level, which enables you to not only color code those things on the calendar, but it also gives you the ability to then run helpful and legible reports. So for example, if I wanted to give this a category of, I don't know, arbitration, I don't have a deposition category. If I wanted to give it a category of arbitration, I could then go into Amicus and say, Amicus, run me a report that shows me every arbitration on any calendar in my database that is coming up in the next 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. Those types of reports are built into Amicus. It doesn't take anybody writing anything special from you or setting up new views in Outlook. They exist out of the box. You own them. All you have to do is learn how to use them, and you have a really powerful set of reports and information that you can use to help plan from a staffing perspective. You know, where's your firm need to be in 30 to 60 days? Who's on vacation? Oh my gosh, we have 4 arbitrations coming up. We need that information so that we can keep our staff with a lower stress level and on task and on top of the things that are coming up in the near future. This first screen here then is another place where Outlook and Amicus really differ, and if you are truly trying to manage your practice, and malpractice carriers prefer that you do, if you are really trying to manage your practice, you have absolutely got to make a relationship between the file that this appointment is related to and the appointment. So I could say deposition of Dr. Spratt. But if I am a personal injury or medical malpractice firm and I have 97 active cases, how on earth would I ever know what case this deposition was for? In Outlook, I have to then say, you know, Ramus versus United Hospital Corp. Or whatever it is. I don't want to tell somebody in my firm they have to retype something that already exists in my database. Instead of typing, I'm going to click on my file list, and it pops up on my other screen, I apologize, and I'm going to pick the file that this belongs on. Now I'll just pick a generic file here. The firm members is similar to your need to invite someone to an appointment in Outlook. But Amicus says, no, I'm not going to make you invite someone and wait for them to accept and see it as tentative on their calendar. We give our team of people who we are working with collaboratively on files, we give them the power to add something to someone else's calendar. And yes, of course, you can control this with security. If there are certain people that you only want to be able to view the calendar and not create new entries, you can control that with security in Amicus. But maybe I am supporting an attorney as a paralegal or legal secretary, and I'm just trying to get this deposition on my attorney's calendar. I simply click on the little blue icon. It brings up a list of all of the people in my office. I'm going to add it to Perry's calendar. So now you'll see it's on my calendar and Perry's calendar. I can also link this appointment to a contact, which is really the only thing you can do with it in Outlook. You can say it's with this contact. The next page of information on the event detail that I think really sets it apart from Outlook are the sophisticated reminders. In Outlook, you can set a reminder, but you can set one reminder that you continue to snooze or dismiss or reset or snooze or dismiss or reset over and over and over and over again. And many of you may open up Outlook and hear it go ding, 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 because 427 reminders that you have never dismissed show up in this big long list that has become completely useless to you. In Amicus, you have control over the reminders, when they happen, and how they happen. In Outlook, you have no option but to have something pop up on your screen. But Amicus says, you know what, I understand how lawyers and legal professionals work, and sometimes I want to be reminded about something that's going to happen a week from now. And I don't want that to be a pop-up on my screen that makes me feel like I need to be somewhere in 5 minutes. I'd rather be reminded via email. Hey, Jen, by the way, don't forget, deposition of Dr. Spratt is 1 week away. It's a gentle reminder. I have control over when it happens, and I have control over how it happens. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at the reminders options in Amicus, you'll see that you can remind firm members. Those are people who you have linked to the appointment, other people, everyone involved. And you have an option here to do it by reminder alert, which is similar to the pop-up that you get in Outlook, or via email. And you can set a reminder to happen minutes, hours, or days before, or on a particular date. So if you want to be reminded 30 days before, you would select on this date, and then you would select your calendar, and you would pick the exact date that you want to be reminded. Maybe you also want to be reminded via email one day before, and you can set exactly what time you want to be reminded. And maybe you finally want to be reminded by reminder alert 15 minutes before. I have control over how I am reminded, and I do not have to rely on one reminder that I continue to snooze or dismiss and worry that sometimes I've accidentally hit dismiss all and there was one in that list that I didn't mean to dismiss. Let Amicus help you determine on an event-by-event basis what kind of reminder structure you want. You also have something in Amicus called change notification. Now in Outlook, when you update an appointment that someone else is linked to, you can send them an update, you get prompted. But there's also a feature in Amicus that says, listen, when I make a change to an appointment, notify the firm members. And so they will get an email that gets sent automatically from your Amicus server. It doesn't even pop up on your screen that you have to affirmatively say, yes, send an update and close out. It just happens. So even when I update an appointment in Amicus, I have fewer steps that I need to take to be sure that everyone involved in that appointment is made aware. I can set a repeat. Now, this is the equivalent of a recurrence in Outlook, but I have the same, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly options. But something that you don't have as obvious to you in Outlook is the ability to say what you want Amicus to do with the occurrence if it falls on a weekend or a holiday. Another indication here that the folks at Gavel & Gown, the makers of Amicus Attorney, they understand that a lot of what's going on a calendar in Amicus Attorney is relevant to a case that's in litigation, civil filing guidelines. Civil rules dictate when things are due and when things should be filed, but you get exceptions to those rules when it falls on a weekend or a holiday. Maybe you get till the day after. Maybe if it's in an appellate court, you have to do it the day before. If you have a statute of limitations date that's going to run on a Saturday, guess what? If you put that on a Saturday in Outlook, Outlook's going to say, okay. But Amicus is going to say, well, this is a weekend. Are you sure you want this statute of limitations reminder to fall on a weekend? It understands that the dates and events that we put on legal professionals' calendars need to be treated differently than just some general appointment to, get your hair cut or, meet the lawn care person at 3 o'clock. There's an intimate understanding of the types of events that lawyers are dealing with. There's lots of other items here that I could go on and on about, but we're going to run out of time if I do that. I do just want to point out one quick thing. I'm going to hit the OK button here, and you're going to see my appointment here. And very easy to move appointments. I can just drag it anywhere on the calendar. I can drag it and drop it all the way over here on my calendar. And I can also then, once things have been moved, go to the History tab and see every single thing that anyone has done on this particular appointment. So it's an audit trail. And you'll notice that I can't type here. This is Amicus sort of showing me, here's everything that happened. It was created, then the category was updated, then the time was changed, and the time was changed again. So it's really nice to see, what's happening on our appointments. Okay. So I put this appointment on the blank versus Biddle file. So I want to show you now, when my client calls and says, when's our deposition again? Over on the Files module, and you'll see my file index here, if I go to the blank versus Biddle file, on the right-hand side of the file, and you'll notice, of course, that our file looks like a file, making it very user-friendly and easy to use. If I go to the Events page, I'm going to see my file, my deposition. So when my client calls and says, when's the deposition, I make 2 clicks. I open the file, I go to the events page. It's today at 4 o'clock. So not only does it make it easier on my staff member to locate the information, but I truly believe that my client feels better because I could that quickly locate their information. That gives my client a sense that my office knows what we're doing. We are streamlined. I can put my finger on that information faster than you can even ask me the question. I don't have to say, oh, you know what, I'll have to call you back because it's not on my calendar, it's on his calendar, and I don't have access to his calendar, and he's out of the office. No. When my client calls, they need to feel like anybody in my office can give them relevant information about their case. Amicus Attorney enables you to do that. Anybody goes to the file, they go to the events page, and they see your deposition, the deposition of Dr. Sprout on your case is today at 4 o'clock. Okay. Since we're on the file, I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about some of the other things that you can see from the file. If you think about Outlook and the fact that there is no such thing as a file in Outlook, even if you consider the fields that you see on a contact record, you have a big open note field. You have some fields for things like Social Security number and date of birth, and you can customize that. But again, user level for a lot of firms, we're redoing customization and work at that local level in Outlook. Whereas in Amicus, when you open an Amicus Attorney file, you are seeing all the same information no matter who in your office is opening the file. So the first thing I love about Amicus, and hopefully you can tell just by my excitement in doing this webinar that I feel very strongly about Amicus Attorney. I used it when it was version 4 as a law clerk in the mid-90s, so I have been a fan of Amicus for a very long time. But look at the file. For those of us who are transitioning from paper or just, skeptical about the technology, look at your screen. It looks like a file. The left-hand side is a list of people on the file. It replaces my client intake sheet with staples that scratched my hands and Sharpie markers and business cards taped to the inside front cover. Here are the people I'm dealing with on this case. And it's another example of how we can make relationships, one-to-many relationships between files and contacts. Harold Blank is my client on this case. Phil Agrarian is a lawyer on this case. But notice what happens right here, sort of in the middle of my screen, when I highlight any of these different contacts. It shows me that specific contact's information. So remember before, from the contact, when I clicked on the phone and I filled out what file we were talking about, if you work from the file in Amicus and you click on the little black phone, not only does it inherit who you called and who you are, but it also inherits the file. So if you simply work from within the file in Amicus Attorney, many of the clicks and relationships that you need to make to really take advantage of the power of Amicus Attorney are done for you automatically. You must be making a phone call to Jonathan Biddle regarding the Blank versus Biddle file. So here is my call. Now, to illustrate another feature of Amicus, I am not going to hit my Do a Time Entry button this time. I'm just going to hit OK, and you'll see why in just a moment. So we have our left-hand side people on the file, anybody I might need to contact. And if I click on my Add button here, I will be taken to my firm-wide contact list, not just my local Outlook contact list, but the firm-wide global shared Outlook contact list, so that I can pick a name of someone and add them to the file, and then identify what role that particular person plays on that file. Well, I added David Barrett. Here's his contact information. What role does he play? Well, let's just say he's a witness. Excuse me. The right-hand side of the file represents everything you would have two-hole punched and put in that paper file. And it even looks like a Brad in a paper file. And if I right-click on this list, I will see all the different pages of information that I have available to me on the right-hand side of the file. This right-click list here is also available over here on the left-hand side under your file facts. It's just a convenient and alternate way to navigate through your file. No one way is right or wrong. But I want to just talk really quickly about the different things that you can see on the file. If I right-click on the file, I have a summary page, which is really designed to say, hey, give me a 1- or 2-sentence explanation as to what this case is about. You know, the Blanks are suing Biddle for failing to close the purchase of the real estate. It's not necessarily a place where we keep going and adding information, but it's if I were walking down the hall and said, hey, what's that blank versus Biddle case about, this is what you would say to me. The next page that I want to point out is the notes page. What's great about the Amicus Attorney Notes page is that instead of tearing out a piece of paper in a legal pad and writing a note, and maybe eventually filing it in the paper file for everybody who's collaborating on the file's benefit, but probably not, I can take a note to the file. And if I hit New Note here, I get a new note screen, and I can take the note. And I might say, met with associate attorney to discuss specific performance research. They will reach out to me for assistance, gave them a deadline of next week, blah, 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 blah. Whatever the note is, you're making a note to the file. When I hit OK, this note is automatically filed in my file. I didn't have to write the client or matter name on it or the matter number. I didn't have to get out of my chair and go pull a paper file from a cupboard. I didn't have to do any of that. I didn't then have to hope that my writing was legible so that the next person who opened the file could read the note. I typed a note in Amicus, and there it is. There's the note. Anybody wants to read it, they can open the note and see it. Oh, and my friendly do a time entry button, because you know what? I had an internal meeting with my associate to discuss this research. I probably want to bill my time for that. So I click do a time entry. Everything's inherited. The mess of the note that I took because I didn't really spell check is here, and I'm simply going to add how much time I spent. Everything that you do in Amicus can be turned into a time entry. And while I don't want to sound like one of those attorneys that believes in nickel and diming our clients, I am absolutely an attorney who believes in capturing every single thing that you do, no matter what type of biller you are. Whether you're a flat fee, contingency, or hourly biller, you cannot determine whether your business is successful without capturing your time and comparing it to what it costs you to take those cases. Amicus makes it so easy to capture your time. It's almost like a no-brainer to use it and to capture your time. The problem with Outlook then is if I come into Outlook and I look at a contact and I make a phone call, there's nothing called do a time entry. There's nothing that enables me to track my time. Now, if I launch a phone call from Outlook, there is a way to start a timer, but it doesn't understand rounding up. It doesn't understand minimum billable amounts. It's just a raw time spent timer that you can't really convert into anything that will show up on a bill to a client. So I might be doing all this work in Outlook, sending emails and making phone calls and marking to-dos done, but I'm not being prompted to bill my time. I'm not being reminded to bill my time. So let me show you, when I talk about being reminded to bill your time, I want to show you a couple of things that Amicus does to really help you capture all the time that you have spent. And the first is going to be on the communications page, which is one of the next things that I wanted to talk about here on the file. If I go to the communications page and I say, you know what, show me all my communications, phone calls, emails, messages, you're going to notice, here's a phone call that I did just a few moments ago. And you're going to notice a lovely blue timesheet ledger. This is my visual reminder from Amicus that says, you had a phone call, but you did not click on the do a time entry button. Visual reminders. Here's the work you did. You will also notice those visual reminders on your calendar. If I go to a day on my calendar in the past, any appointment that I have not yet billed for is going to have that little blue timesheet reminder. And all I have to do to capture the time is click on the little blue timesheet and get my timesheet. It'll even fill in with the description of the appointment and the duration of the appointment, just in case that's how much time you want to bill. You want to change that? Go ahead. As soon as I bill my time for that, in just a second after my demo database refreshes, that visual reminder is going to go away. If I come back on the 11th, it's gone. My screen's flashing a little bit from my remote connection. I apologize. So I'm reminded all throughout Amicus about the time that I have spent and that I need to bill for it. A couple of other things that you can see on the file. From the right-hand page, I can see notes. We've already talked about that. I can see all of the events. We've already talked about that when I gave the example of my client calls and says, when is something? But I want to point something out here. This will show me events that are on my calendar as well as events that are on somebody else's calendar. And I just want to move to a different file really quickly to give you an example, because the one that I was on is a blank file typically. Look at my file for Cooperman versus Cooperman. This is a sample family law file. And look at all the different events that we have scheduled for this case. I have a meeting with client that's assigned to Heather and another attorney. Here's a to-do that's assigned to Lindsay. So not only can you see everything that's coming up or things that have happened and been marked done, but you can also see whose responsibility they are. So if a client calls and says, can you tell me what's going on? You could say, well, it looks like we have, this motion is going to be due here on the 12th. There's a meeting with your social worker tomorrow. You can share the information with your client much more easily. Now, I showed you on the note how you could hit do a time entry. And I showed you on the phone call how you could hit do a time entry. And we talked about it from the calendar. I can see the time that I've spent. One other piece of Amicus that I want to try to show you in the few minutes that we have left is your communications module. The folks at Gavel & Gown have made a really good decision to play nice with Outlook as it relates to email. We know that people are using Outlook for email, and we also know that email represents a great amount of the communications that are had on a case. So it's not enough to just go into Amicus and be able to log your phone calls. I also need to be able to save my emails to the appropriate file in Amicus Attorney. So what you'll see here is that from the Amicus interface, I can see emails because Outlook and Amicus integrate with each other. So I can get an email and view it from within Amicus. I can highlight it and associate it with the appropriate file, which you see over here on the left-hand side. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to click through all those screens. But you pick the file and you say save and make association. But here's what I love, my favorite little blue timesheet. I am seeing visually you had an email and you have not yet billed for it. Unbilled email represents one of the greatest opportunities for capturing time, and an opportunity that most firms lose hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on. And so I'll just bring up my rudimentary, Windows calculator here and do a quick calculation for you. Let's say, very conservatively, that you receive 10 emails a day. Now, I receive closer to 100, 150 emails a day, but let's just use 10. And let's say that you bill your minimum of 0.1, 6 minutes for each of those emails. That's 1 hour a day. That is not one additional hour that you have worked. That is 1 hour that you spent doing relevant client work that you very likely did not stop and bill your time for. Now, let's say that you bill at $175 an hour. So every day, you're leaving $175 on the table. Let's say you do that 5 days a week, $875 a week. And let's say that you do that 50 weeks out of the year. I will let everybody go on vacation for 2 weeks. You as one attorney are likely leaving close to $43,000 on the table. Now, if you have 5 attorneys in your office who are all doing that, who bill around that same amount, you are leaving close to $250,000 on the table, doing work that you had every right to bill for, communicating with your client or opposing counsel or witnesses or whomever, that we are simply not taking advantage of. But Amicus says, let me help you. Here's your email. You haven't billed for it. And you might be saying, well, that's great. I can go to the notes and I can look at my calendar and I can go to this communications place. But wouldn't it be great if I could just say to Amicus, show me everything I've done, whether it's a note, a phone call, an email, a document, whatever I've done, and let me know if I've billed for it? And you absolutely can. And that is a feature in Amicus Attorney called the Time Entry Assistant. So in Amicus, we have a timesheets module. Now, there are versions of Amicus that also give you billing components, and there are versions of Amicus that don't, because Gavel & Gown recognizes that a lot of people have an accounting and billing program that they're happy with, and so they play nice with those programs, and they link with things like PC Law and tabs and time slips. If you do not have a billing program, you should absolutely inquire about the Amicus Premium Plus billing product, but you'll see that you have a timesheets module. What the timesheets module does is it enables you to write your time down. So instead of writing it on paper or typing it in a Word document or putting it in an Excel spreadsheet and then giving it to someone else to re-enter in your billing program, which is, all due respect to everybody on the call, not an efficient way to enter your time, you can come into Amicus and you can enter your time. You just say new time entry and you'll get that same time entry screen that we've seen throughout today's presentation. But what you also see from your time entries is something called the Time Entry Assistant. What the Time Entry Assistant does is it says, okay, I'm going to show you everything that you have done in this database for the last 3 days, 7 days, 2 weeks, 31 days. I'm going to use 31 days in my example because this is generally what happens at a firm. You get an email from your billing clerk that says, I'm running pre-bills tomorrow, make sure all your time is entered. And hundreds of people start scurrying all over the place to try to recreate their month. They look through their phone logs, they look through Outlook, they sort by date, they see what they need to bill, they go to their documents list, they sort by date modified. They spend 4 hours trying to find all their time for the month. You cannot remember everything you have done all month. No matter how wise and how great of a memory you have, it's just not reasonable to expect you or anyone else in your firm to do that. So Amicus has this time entry assistant. And I said to Amicus, show me everything in the last 31 days where I haven't entered time. Here are a bunch of emails. And I can see easily from the icon, user-friendly. These are emails. Here are phone calls I made that I didn't bill for. Here are tasks or appointments that I had that I didn't bill for. I can highlight any of them that I want and hit the time saver button, and Amicus will automatically turn them into time entries for me. I can also say do a time entry on one or multiples, and it will actually pop up the time entry screen for me one at a time so I can complete the time entry however I want to. But it is one of the only programs, really. I mean, there are others on the market, obviously. We all know that there's competition in the market. But Amicus does a phenomenal job of presenting the user with all the work they've done and making it very easy from this screen to capture their time. I know that I was going to go until about 45 minutes. I need 2 more minutes, and then we will open it up for questions. If you think about Outlook and you come into your calendar, there's no reminder to bill my time. There's no right-click, do a time entry. There's no way to take something that exists on my calendar or on my tasks list and turn it into a time entry. And I've had people say, oh, well, my IT person wrote me a little app that does this thing and it sends it to Excel. That's wonderful. It's a workaround. It's probably going to break when you update Outlook or Excel, and it's not going to be supported when your IT person decides to, leave town or retire or wins the lottery. So you may have a workaround and you may have done things that have enabled you to use Outlook to this point, but if you are serious about global access to your data, if you are serious about sharing information easily, having it centrally located, and really streamlining your practice, then it's really imperative that you consider a true legal practice management program. What I want to end with is how Outlook falls short as it relates to conflict searches. I tend to like to start with the thing that I consider the most important thing about practice management, and avoiding conflicts in my mind is one of the most important things that practice management programs like Amicus Attorney bring to the table. But I decided in this presentation to end with it because if you don't remember anything else that I talked about, I really want you to think about the integrity of your conflict checks as they exist right now in Outlook. If I need to run a conflict search and I do not have Amicus Attorney, my process is probably something like this. New email, entire firm. We are about to potentially do work for Jennifer Ramus. Does anybody foresee any conflicts? And it goes out to, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 people. When do you determine, as the person who asked for the conflict search, whether there's a conflict? How many different people are now searching their local Outlook accounts for Ramus? How are those people reporting back? Who then determines if there's a conflict? Is a no response to be interpreted as no conflict? Are you really going to have somebody on your staff, an administrative person, track people down and say, I sent you an email a few days ago about this Ramus, is there a conflict? And keep a prospective client waiting because it takes you days to get the results that you need from multiple people at your firm to determine if there's a conflict check? I promise you your malpractice carrier does not like that system. Furthermore, I have worked at 2, 3 different law firms in my career. So when they send that email today, I don't get it because I don't work there anymore. But there very well might have been a conflict for that firm because I might have had some communication or some dealings with this potential new client that they now don't know about because they didn't have a program like Amicus where I could log a phone call and save it to the contact. They don't have that. Malpractice carriers are keenly sensitive to how firms are running conflict checks. Avoiding conflicts, avoiding malpractice, staying out of a dispute regarding fees or the services that you intended to provide. There is no better insurance policy than having technology that keeps you out of trouble. So let me just show you quickly the conflict search in Amicus, and then we will move on to questions. So in Amicus, if I go to my contact index, I will have a drop-down that says check conflicts. So it doesn't just say search like it does in Outlook, because search what? I have to search every single module in Outlook separately to find what I need. I might have to search the calendar, then the contact list, then the tasks, then the journal, then I have to have 12 people in my office do the same thing. With Amicus, I say check conflicts. Simple command. I can run a basic search, which frankly I never recommend you do. I always say for conflict perspective, always run the advanced search. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to see if I can represent somebody with the last name of Cooperman. Where do you want to search? I want you to search contacts, addresses, custom fields, file names, notes, summaries, file status, text fields, note records, events, documents, time entries, communications, notes, and messages. Everything. I want you to search everything. Do you know how long this would take for multiple people to do anything even remotely similar in Outlook? Hours and hours and hours. I'm going to hit check now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 seconds. Here's my result. Amicus found 15 instances of that name. It tells me the type of record that included that name. Here's a contact. Here's a file. Here's an event. Here's a time entry. Here's a phone call. This does not necessarily mean there is a conflict, but this is what you provide to the person who is responsible for making the determination, and you say, here's everything we have about Cooperman. You decide if there's a conflict. You can't make a good decision about a conflict if you don't have good data to base that decision on. So with that, I will go ahead and jump back to my PowerPoint and just put some information up on the screen. I hope that you gathered some good information here today about using Outlook and potentially using Amicus Attorney to manage your practice instead. If you have questions about Amicus, if you'd like a more complete demonstration, feel free to jot down this contact information here. Anyone at Affinity as well as anyone at Gavel & Gown would be happy to provide you with any additional information. There have been some questions posted, so I will read through them and see what I can do.
Thank you, Jennifer. We hope that the audience found this session informative and useful. If you'd like to contact Affinity Consulting, they can be reached at 877-676-5492, or again, you can send an email to Katie Kennedy at kennedy@affinityconsulting.com. Our next Consultant Spotlight webinar, Desktop versus Cloud Practice Management, is being held on Thursday, November 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to register for this session or any other upcoming events, you can do so from our website at www